When God of War on PS4 was first announced, there was a lot of mixed feelings within the gaming community. There were those who were very excited, especially at its reveal, and then there were others who didn't know exactly what to do with the fact that Kratos was going to be accompanied by his son, Atreus, through the journey. In fact, God of War became a meme where everybody branded it Dad of War. But this did not stop the developers from actually pushing their dream forward in order to provide a very solid experience. And so in today's short editorial, I'm going to be looking at a retrospective of God of War on PS4 and speaking about 3 things which the game did correctly.
Ow! What are you...
Try again.
So stay tuned and enjoy the video. If you like it, please leave a like, leave a comment as well as to what you believe this game has been able to achieve, and let's get the conversation going in the comments section. So right off the bat, we have to immediately talk about how good the story of God of War on PS4 actually is. One of the very best things that you eventually discover as you start playing the game is that the game is actually very well narrated. Its progression, the way the story and the characters all tie into one another makes for a very full experience.
I warned you.
Finally.
You would not listen.
Fine. My turn.
Kratos is on a journey to go and achieve a goal, and while he's on that journey, Atreus eventually jumps in instead of getting a similar kind of journey and just accompanying his dad to distribute his mom's ashes at the highest point in the realm. He eventually finds out that he is on a journey to becoming a man. So there is a lot that goes on. The essential storytelling basis of all of this, in which you introduce your protagonist and then you put your protagonist into a need, and then moving the protagonist from a need into some chaos, and then providing disappointments. Every single thing in bringing this story full circle was actually there. And then you eventually have an ending and a conclusion, which I felt was quite satisfactory, where it had an ending and at the same time did not leave everybody in too much of a cliffhanger. Now, yes, if you play all the way to the end, you're going to see a small revelation of a character which will most likely be making up the basis for a second game.
The ball!
In terms of the story, we have to look at the characters. The characters are well defined. They have each one of them their motives. They have each one of them their own character arches that are very interesting and actually work very well into the story. What you have is characters that are fully fleshed out, fully developed, who have their own story arches that are revealed at very opportune times over the course of the game. So not only are you enjoying a wonderful gameplay experience, you're discovering each character, you're discovering the reason each character is very important to the story, and you're encountering each character in wherever part of their story they actually are in, and that actually affects your own story advertently. I mean, it's crazy how the developers and the storytellers and writers were able to interweave all of these things together.
That you lost to us.
He thinks it might still be in his stomach.
If you look at perhaps a character like Freya, you would discover that she is also in a weird situation where she's been removed from a position which she once held and is now in a strange place, very similar to our protagonist Kratos, and then eventually they work together to achieve Kratos' goal in terms of exploring the world and trying to reach the highest point. And then in the story, one of the really most, I would say, pivotal points was where our protagonist thinks he has found himself at the highest point in the land, but then discovers that this is not necessarily the highest point, but there is more of the journey that's still left to go on.
It's in Jotunheim, realm of the giants.
No!
That could not be what she meant.
Take a look. This is the last known bridge to Jotunheim in all the realms. See that mountain? Looks like a giant's finger scraping the sky. That's the highest peak in all the realms. No here.
I think to me, this was a very critical point in the game where I felt like the developers, the writers, everybody who had a hand in this game had actually tried their best to make sure that this experience would not be cut short. Okay, moving on to the second thing, which God of War on PS4 did very well, was engaging combat that was inclusive of every single player. Now, a lot of people compared God of War's combat to some sort of Dark Souls, or maybe what you have in some fighting games that you progress and it's very combat heavy. But I have to say that the way the game was actually presented, it allowed for players of every kind of skill class to be able to enjoy the combat, and it was satisfying all around.
From behind!
So first we have a look at the way the animations work, the way the sound design works, and the way all of that ties into a wonderful immersive experience. Because if you notice, Kratos is fighting a very physical battle, so he is exerting a lot of physical force. And from the animation, you can see that this was actually well done and well polished. Every single animation, if you hit an enemy who blocked your attack, the way you bounce back in slow motion actually felt very weighty. The physics that was behind it allowed for you to be able to feel like, oh, my attack is not going to work here. And then when Kratos did an evasive roll, you pretty much saw the way the camera angle actually allowed for it to feel like you have just dodged something that was about to take you out. And that immersive feeling and the camera positioning was actually done very well. These are some of the things that make combat well-rounded, especially when you're playing in a melee context. Now, the next thing is combat difficulty. From the story mode all through the Gimme God of War difficulty, a lot of players will tell you that that difficulty is actually reserved for those who are willing to learn the in-depth fighting mechanics of the game. And surprise, there are in-depth fighting mechanics that actually do come with God of War on PS4. For a lot of casual players who may have just, gone through the game, basically, played through, destroyed all the enemies, you probably would not have noticed that there were a lot of different things that you could do in terms of your weapon switching, in terms of how you actually mapped out your special moves, and how you actually designed your gear to be able to allow for you to fight in different ways that you didn't even imagine that the game could even go. In fact, there are two YouTubers who spent their entire time teaching and revealing a lot of these mechanics within the game, and a lot of people even said they didn't even know if the developers were aware that these things were part of the game. Now, even though they may have seemed like a lot of exploits, or the developers may have intended to put them there and did not say anything to the community, I still think the credit goes to those who designed the combat system and made it something of a phenomenal addition to the game. You can't take away from that, where Kratos is actually doing some really cool stuff in battle. He's able to wield his weapons in amazing ways and take out enemies and then provide for you an enjoyable experience. Now, I have to say the Gimme God of War mode is a very difficult mode for those who always want to play things in that kind of difficulty, who want to enjoy what it feels like to go through excruciating combat. You can engage in this mode. It will provide a very fair challenge for, if not 90% of gamers who take on this. And the thing about that mode is once you select it, it is locked to that mode, and the rewards that you get from it, actually you get one reward from it, is only exclusive for those who play that mode. So not only did it provide for that kind of gameplay, it provided something that that worked as a badge of honor for those who were able to take on it. But nonetheless, with all the skills, all the animations, all the RPG that actually goes into the combat system of God of War on PS4, I want to say that it is one of the best combat systems that you have. Now, many may argue with Sekiro and the way it's actually designed as a very difficult game for a niche audience. I feel like where Sekiro may have fallen short was in providing an inclusion for everybody to be able to play the game. But at the same time, that was Sekiro's market, so they stuck with that, and actually that decision paid off in the video game award that they won for Game of the Year. But at the same time, God of War, which included everybody, also won Game of the Year. So we can look at both sides of the coin and say these are both viable ways of doing combat in a video game. And finally, to bring this editorial to a conclusion, we're going to look at the third and final thing that I would say for now we can discuss that God of War on PS4 did very well. And that was finishing the project and not leaving any room for extra DLC or whatever, but instead providing for players to be able to speculate on a possible future release of another game, which would be another story-driven experience that players can engage in, maybe in a similar or slightly different way from the current game that we have right now. Now, what do I mean? God of War on PS4 has no DLCs, has no expansions, has no paid microtransactions of any kind. Instead, what you have is a full and complete gaming experience, which is something that is very rare for a video game that you have to play for about 25 hours. So the developers have followed this pattern and they said to themselves, we're going to finish this game. We're not going to add anything to it. And we're going to make sure that gamers have the complete experience once they're done with it. In fact, this same pattern has also been carried over to some other games that have been released this year. Sekiro is one of them. Also, you have Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which right now seems to be on that path. But it seems like with Jedi Fallen Order, there might be some expansions and some DLCs in the future, which is something that fans are actually asking for. So in that case, I think they might bring something to the table, because they did sell a digital deluxe edition or whatever. Now, I don't know what that consists of because I didn't purchase a digital deluxe or beautiful edition. In terms of God of War, nonetheless, there were other things that you could buy. You could buy a book that was actually narrated. You could also buy the soundtrack and all kinds of other things in order to support the development of the game. But nonetheless, when you look at the game, it sets itself apart as a game that's actually complete from beginning to end, where you have nothing to worry about in terms of extra purchases. You can attain every single item by gameplay alone. And this is what, in my opinion, makes a very solid story-driven experience. So overall, God of War on PS4 is the complete package. I think anybody who wants to evaluate a single-player story-driven narrative needs to look at this game and take notes from all the things that it has done right and apply them to their own gaming experience. If I was a developer or an aspiring developer or an aspiring story writer, I would ensure that I follow this pattern where my games are left with a satisfying ending and also something that my reader or my gamer who's playing the game can actually anticipate for a future release. Thank you very much for watching the video. I appreciate you guys' time and audience, and I'll see you in my next retrospective. This is the Gaming Daddy channel. Peace.